Welcome, Sexplorers, to this a special Pride Month episode of Sexplorations. It's me, your host, Adelina Adler, GSRD sex coach based out of North Carolina. Oh, also an educator. And today I'm here to do something a little different. I think I'm returning back to the old format where I do my little Delilah slash NPR voice into my microphone and maybe play some cool chill hop music in the background, which I'll edit in starting around here. So grab your tea and get ready with a little bit of story time with Addie here as I share with you today my pride story. Now, my pride story begins, as most do, when I was a wee little babe. I was just a tiny little thing. And I was a child who had crushes very early on. I had crushes on a lot of things and people. And when I say things, I'm very literal here. My first crush was Godzilla. Straight face serious. My first fangirl moment was that giant angry Japanese lizard with those intense Scorpio eyes and that towering, powerful presence. And he and Rodan, oh yes, they were it for me. And I remember my mother was saying she would never let me live that down and would tell my future husband that was my first love. And I would write fan fiction and dictate fan fiction because I couldn't quite write yet, but I would illustrate it. And he was cool. But aside from that, there was, the usual myriad of humanoid animal people from Disney movies or cartoons and all sorts of things. Oh God, the mouse from The Great Mouse Detective, both Basil of Baker Street and that freaking Can mouse. Oh, yes, please. Jessica Rabbit, of course, everybody knows. The evil chick from Atlantis. Oh my goodness. Step on me, mommy. And, growing up in a Hispanic household, a Puerto Rican household, there was Univision. And when I tell you that, gosh, down to the weather reporters. Oh, gosh, there were so many beautiful women. So many. And I knew that immediately this wasn't just an aesthetic appreciation of, wow, she's pretty, I want to look like her. Though, sometimes that was there too, like, oh, I want to look like her. But I also wanted very much to smooch them. That was, and hold their hands, which was, my extent of relationship knowledge at the time. So, I remember early on as well, I had a friend, a childhood friend that lived in our same little block. His name was Josh. And he had two older sisters. And I absolutely loved one of them. I thought she was the prettiest thing in the world. And there's this little bashfulness that comes over you when you're surrounded by a girl crush and you're that young. You know what? I think honestly it's called gay panic, and it still happens. So I don't know if this is just an exclusively childhood phenomenon, because I'm pretty sure, I still experience that. Well, anyway, I was gay panicking really hard over a friend of Josh's sister. And so I remember one day I plucked a little bouquet of clovers and I had tied them with another little strand of grass or like the stem of a clover or one of those things. And I was so proud. It was so bushy. It was so good. I had found so many clovers and I was convinced she was going to love them. So I waited for the opportune moment, and as she stepped outside to greet the day, I was there as well, holding up my tiny little bouquet. And she took them and very politely put them back into my hand. See, she was, turns out, allergic. So, I also have ADHD, and some of you may already hearing that, understand that rejection sensitivity that happened immediately afterwards, I remember feeling that sinking in your stomach, like, oh, did I do something wrong? But that didn't dissuade me necessarily. It did dissuade me from giving her the flowers. In fact, I believe that I may have gotten, more than likely, a bit of a girls don't give girls flowers message from my mother. So, but in either case, later on, I do remember a teacher. She was the other kindergarten's teacher. Our kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Hamlin, was wonderful and beautiful and sweet, much older woman, and very kind to us. But Miss Paisel, if you're out there listening, I am that little child who used to ask you to whisper something in your ear so I could give you a cute little peck on the cheek afterwards. I was so slick. I was smitten, and occasionally she would substitute for us. And I would take those opportunities. My goodness, I was never more attentive in class than when she was speaking. I found her so smart, so beautiful, so elegant. And I just wanted to be the best student for her, Well, one day I remember telling one of the other kids in the class that, I had a crush on her. And she immediately went over and told Miss Paisel. And after that, I was never allowed to do my little secret kisses on her cheek again. And there it came again, that feeling that I had done something horribly wrong. In retrospect, it makes a lot of sense now to me as an adult. Looking back, I would also probably be like, that's not the most professional thing. But as a little kid with zero context for that sort of thing, at the time, it struck me very, very hard. And I realized I couldn't really confide in people about that sort of thing without feeling the betrayal and rejection. I was outed very early young. I was very, very quickly outed, and I had that experience of like momentary judgment, which honestly, because children sometimes have the memory span of the attention span of gnats, like I remember at least that passing very quickly, even though I would still longingly look into the room across the hallway just to get a peek at the pretty Miss Paisel. Now, moving onwards away from, let's say, our kindergarten days, there was later elementary school, like 2nd and 3rd grade, and there I made a friend. Now, her name was Amber, and Amber was my best friend. Amber would walk with me all the time, talk to me all the time, and she was a foster child who was, skipped around from house to house and unfortunately experienced some very terrible abuse. And she would tell me about it. And again, I am a kid. I don't know what else to do. But I remember feeling this conviction of, I will protect you. I'll always protect you. You're safe with me. And Amber and I would hold hands in the schoolyard, and I would chase the bully Travis G, that's his last initial, who was held back. So he was much bigger than us, and he would constantly be bullying her especially. So I remember taking a stick, and the stick was my sword, and I would just beat him away from her. And so after one of these little beatings, or threats mostly, and that he had left us, Amber and I were happily walking hand in hand towards where the other kids were playing kickball, and they started calling us lesbians. Lesbians! Lesbians! They said, in not so nice terms. And I didn't know what to make of it because I had no idea what that meant. I had never heard that word before. And I'm not sure if Amber did. In fact, I don't quite recall her reaction to it all. But I do remember that when I went home and I told my mother about what had happened, she responded. She went aghast. She went, oh! Her flabbers were aghast, and she's like, no, mija, never let anybody call you that. Eso está feo. That's ugly. That's sin. She made it very clear that girls who liked other little girls were not of God and were going to hell. And since I was a good Christian noodle, I absolutely could not be one of those lesbians. Well, she was partially right, because it turns out I'm pansexual as hell. But at the time, I remember that seed of internalized homophobia got planted really quickly. And my mother was one of those people who, if there was a film we were watching that had like a makeout scene or like a sexy scene between a heterosexual couple, I could watch a makeout. I could watch kisses. I couldn't watch sex scenes. That I'd have to either step out of the room or plug my eyes while they muted it, and the scene would pass. But if there was an instance of a woman kissing a woman or a man kissing a man, that film was shut off and was never played again. I remember that happened with the opening to one of The World Is Not Enough, James Bond film, with that wonderful music video from Garbage, where she just smooches herself. How dare she? And then in Dude, Where's My Car, when the guys start making out, and my mom was like, oh no, que feo, gross, yuck, they ruined it. They ruined the masterpiece that was Dude, Where's My Car, with a homoerotic kiss. And so it was so shunned, so shut out. She was a strong believer in the gay agenda. She was very vehemently against any sort of representation. So I grew up with none. That is, until middle school. Insert twinkly page turn sound here. In middle school was where I discovered anime. Now, technically I discovered anime a little bit, like right at the beginning, like at the end of, I'd say, yeah, like right at the beginning. I believe I was like 10 or 9. And it began with Pokemon. And I loved me some Pokemon. I was obsessed, y'all. And when I see that my mother thought that Pokemon was made by a satanic worshiping company or whatever the hell, I can understand to an extent, because I was a weeaboo very quickly, and I was obsessed. But I had my hyperfixation, y'all. But along with Pokemon came Sailor Moon, and back then, okay, I just turned 36, like a day or two ago. So this is around a time period where anime was not readily available outside of Toonami, and consequently later the Midnight Run that came before Adult Swim. So I had Dragon Ball Z, I had Sailor Moon, and I had to look for the new content, like online, and it was buried and it was in Japanese pages. I remember sifting for these tiny MP4 videos that were so pixelated just to see the outer Senshi, Sailor Saturn, who was my favorite at the time, and the mysterious cousins, Uranus and Neptune. And I kind of remember staying away a little bit from Uranus and Neptune, because I was like, well, that's kind of I'm a good noodle. I'm not looking at the gay stuff. But, well, I would draw. That's how I learned to draw, tracing my weird bulby computer screen, my HP screen. They weren't flat like they are today. Back in my day, there was a curve, which made it really weird to try to trace off of a screen. So I would print out the pictures and then put another piece of paper over it, slap it on a window, and just draw. Well, because of this, I made some good friends in middle school, some other fellow nerds. And one of them, Mr. Alexander, he had an older brother who had access somehow to more anime. Like, he had Neon Genesis Evangelion on tape. He had so many cool things. And along with that, he had some manga. And now that was a treasure trove. That was a rare, shiny cookie to our little weeb senses. So Alex was the first one who gave me my first Sailor Moon manga and my first Revolutionary Girl Utena manga. Now, I'll begin with the Sailor Moon manga first because for those, I had already kind of sunken in to my enforced heteronormativity at that point. So I was drawing these gals and making my own like OCs, very normal stuff. And then there was one page that had like a little bumper image on it. And it was Usagi and Minako. So Sailor Moon and Sailor Venus in their normal forms. But it was like one of them was like just in this blanket or these sheets, and the other one was behind them just like grabbing and like pulling up the sheet. It was, and let me tell you, when something happened inside, I felt this strange little tingling, this strange familiar feeling. And now I've been someone who's fantasized pretty explicitly since I was young, despite the censored background I had. It's like I came into this world with some carnal knowledge from beyond. But this felt right. And so my drawings, those drawings became a little more close. And while they were nowhere near as suggestive as the image that inspired them, I remember sweating a little while I drew them. Oh, to be this close, to have a friend who was this close, a female friend. I mean, there definitely was. But if anybody else were to look at those pictures now, objectively speaking, they would just see like girls kind of hanging out. That was it, like one behind the other one, not doing anything like that. Just like, where they kind of hug from behind, things like that. Nothing even remotely suggestive. Well, my mother, because I had no privacy, she came up to my room. I slept in the attic in those days, a furnished attic. I mean, let me be clear. And she saw my drawings and I got interrogated. The spotlight shone on me and she was like, "Why are they so close like that?" And I balked, again, afraid, like, what did I do wrong? And I said, well, they're just really close friends. And she ripped it up. There's a mini film that I saw that was basically that the mom had ripped up the girl's drawing of her and another girl and replaced it with a boy, and the little stick figure girls tried to find each other again, and they did. And I cried when I tell you that I saw that, and I cried because on the most intimate level, I understood. But yeah, she ripped them up. And so I was more secretive about my drawings. Oh, they didn't stop. They just became harder to find. But the ones where it was one of my OCs kissing a boy overtly, those were fine. But coming back to revolutionary girl Utena, because a lot of my fellow nerds out there, queer nerds especially, will understand and know how fucking important that anime was to us. And I didn't have access to the anime until about 5 years ago now. But I only had the first manga. And the first manga had that whole line in it with man or woman, it doesn't matter. One of strength and nobility is always a prince. And when I tell you that that had me in a chokehold. I wanted to be a prince like Utena so badly. My little stick sword wielding defender of other women and the weak in general. Not to say that women are weak. I mean, the fact that we were small and bullied. And yeah, I'm not saying that, we're weak. But that part of me really wanted to get out there, be a badass. Wear a boy's uniform. Who cares? It looks cooler on you anyway. But I wasn't allowed to do that in real life, so I just kind of drew myself like that instead. Drawings were my sanctuary. So, and that was for a long time, the only way I really could express any semblance of my queerness. And to that point, even then, I didn't know what a relationship with a woman was even supposed to look like. So, high school or post-high school happened, and after, my mother was removed from the house and I was finally free to step outside of my home, I was suddenly launched into this completely different social sphere. My little misfit gothic friends would host parties, and I'd meet their friends and would host more parties. And, well, let's say Pennsylvania had nothing better to do than to get drunk. So in these parties, I was the person with the iPod that had over 4,000 songs. So I was the DJ in most cases. And this would garner me a lot of very positive attention from the ladies especially. And I found it incredibly easy back then to flirt with women. Like, I don't know how I did it. I try to remember. I try to summon back the guru that was teenage Addie, just shooting the game, rizzing out. I don't know how they say it now, but for some reason I had really good luck. And girls would make out with me. Granted, this would only happen at parties when they had been drinking, and afterwards it wouldn't happen again. So I'm sure there are some of us who've also experienced the 2 beer queers, and and I wonder about that sometimes, because I wonder if it's the fact that your social inhibitions have finally been depleted and you're finally allowed to be a semblance of yourself that you may not even recognize was there, or the nihilistic version that, oh, you're only doing it to impress the men that were in the party. I don't like to think of the latter as being the most likely, because it tends to do that thing that people do where they just vilify women and kind of post some unsavory ulterior motives upon their action. I do like to wonder if it was the former, and I don't blame them. I hope that they have found a closer relationship to that side of themselves or their authentic sexuality since. But that was the only bit of anything really I could get. But I also recognize that in a few other cases, it did go a little further. There were these twins that were so hot. Oh, they were gorgeous. They were, One of them, I actually flirted my way to bed with. And then promptly got disgusted with myself due to internalized homophobia, left the room. And the rest is pretty shitty, so I'm not going to share that because I wasn't the best sometimes. When we're young, we're learning. And that was one of those phases. But I realized that happened, if I recall correctly, a few times, at least twice. If I were starting to initiate something even remotely sexual with a woman, I couldn't get past a certain point without that internalized homophobia creating the most sick feeling in my gut. There was shame, so much shame. And it was visceral, it was in my body. And I don't know how I got over it. Actually I do. Maybe there was a fear as well of just not knowing what I was doing. After all, we do live in a very performative modality of sexuality, especially when we're first starting out and before getting any comprehensive education on it, which I had none at the time. I was just kind of figuring it all out as I went. But, and talks of consent and all of those things were still very poor. Like, they were non-existent back in these days. This is like early 2000s, like 2006, 2007 era. And I think a part of me was also like overwhelmed and afraid of being bad at it, like of not knowing what I was doing. I had no model examples. I still hadn't watched pornography beyond hentai at that time. And hentai, as anyone knows, is not a good example of anything, anything realistic. So I had no model for which to base any of it off of. So here I was faced with something I wanted so badly, but my body was rejecting it viciously, and my mind was also scared about sucking or also about sin. Oh, no, that experience. Eventually, I did find freedom via threesomes. And I feel like for many women who have been forced into compulsive heteronormativity, I feel like this is something that happens a lot. Tell me about your experiences with this, because I'm guessing that this is something that happens a lot. If there was a woman in the bed with us, I would absolutely forget that the man was there. Honestly, I would give a preamble ahead of time to my partner and tell him, hey, I am so sorry. I understand that I'm going to get super excited and that, I might, not give you as much attention sexually as, you may want at this time. But I really, really want to play with the lady. And this was something that I got to eventually saying because I noticed it was a behavior, and the men who thought that this was going to be a gift for them realized very quickly that, oh no, it was a gift for me. And honestly, no person is a gift unless this is a consenting environment where that dynamic is presented. So people who are thinking of it like that, challenge that, please. But we're talking again about young Addie going through her journey, learning things, doesn't have all this knowledge yet that she has now. So let's keep that in mind. And so I realized that was as close as I could be. And I remember learning how to please a woman with my friend Kira. Because, yes, okay, so it was a threesome for her and her boyfriend because she wasn't comfortable and he kept insisting and pushing that they try it. So she asked me, and I remember telling her, yeah, dude, like, here, let's set it up this way. Because before this, I had already some pretty terrible threesomes where my best friend slash, now I recognize her more as a sister, but back then, more so my best friend, was recruited as our third. And I proceeded to be ignored the entire time. And I hated that. I hated it. So I recognized that that was a bad experience. So when Kira came up to me and was very, apprehensive about the situation, I said, hey, listen, okay. I sat all three of them, all three of us down. And I said, listen, this is what we're going to do. Okay. What are you okay with happening? What are you not okay with happening? And I let her make all the rules where she said, okay, no penetration from him to you. And I was like, I am completely fine with that. I also don't want him to penetrate me. He's like, what about fingers? And we were like, fingers are cool. Fingers are cool. And oral, okay, yeah, oral is cool. Oral is cool. And I was like, all right. Now, if at any point in time you're feeling awkward, weird, or just like uncomfortable, say switch and we'll reconfigure into a different position that, focuses a little bit more on you, things like that. Can I tell you that was the most successful threesome, like for that age that I had? Like, we're talking about, I was like maybe 18, 19, and that was well done. Go me. Learning how to negotiate ahead of time, putting that platform out there. But it was successful, and she taught me some stuff. She was like, okay, try this and that, and instructed me on how to play with her. And I was super grateful for that because it really did empower me to get over that initial hump of like, I feel weird. And also I realized that afterwards, I didn't feel icky. None of it felt gross. That weird burden of like, oh, sin, meh, that was pretty much gone. And that fear of, what if I suck, was also pretty much gone, because the emphasis was not on performing well, but on taking care of each other and teaching each other. And that was a really fun lesson to learn early on. So in future threesomes, I tended to bring that to the table. But again, I would also kind of express to the men that, hey, I'm sorry if I get a little like, woo, lost in the sauce, because I am just a little too excited. But that was as close as I could get to a woman, and I couldn't ever date them. I would fawn. I was definitely an aftercare cuddler for them. I'd get them food and all sorts of things. I remember with this one partner, he had ordered an escort to come be with us, and she loved me. I loved her. We talked about sex work. We talked about all sorts of things, spirituality ahead of time. And then I went to town, and she was so sweet and so fun. And I remember her holding my hand as we went back down the stairs to escort her to her car. And I was like, It was so good. It was so good. And I feel happy. I just feel happy that I was able to make somebody else happy in that capacity. But yeah. So even then, though, I continued to have these just heteronormative relationships of just dating men. Meanwhile, I could only climax thinking about a woman 95% of the time. And to this day, that is still the thing. My partners know this, that if I orgasm, chances are that in my head, yeah, you're there, but there's also like another woman present that I've created for this scenario. And I just, it's wild to me because it's always been present. Like, I remember dreaming or having these like wet dreams, if you will, just, early high school on. And I was just feeling so distanced from the experience of it for years. It has really hurt. And I remember talking to my sister Leela, and because she was coming to terms with her own queerness. She's autistic and ADHD as well. And for her, it was even weirder because her modeling behaviors came from me. She was trying to model me, and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So, and yet we were looking at it objectively within the last few years, and we recognized it. I was like, well, you've only always been attracted to men who were feminine looking. And she went, oh yeah. And and together we realized, oh yeah, I don't think you're straight at all. But we discussed that we didn't have any representation outside of sexually pornographic based representation of woman-loving women. There was nothing else. Like, we didn't get any of that. I wasn't allowed, there was like, I guess, the L word, but I didn't watch that. I didn't watch TV much. So I remember we were just kind of like at a loss going, what does it look like? I remember looking up on Instagram, like just sweet woman-loving women, like illustrations and drawings, because I'm still a comic book girly. That's still my favorite form of taking in media. And I was looking at these sweet little pictures, and I was trying to figure it out. Like, what does it look like? Is there a model that I should follow? What is the schema? And unfortunately, a lot of times you see the traditional like butch mask lesbian with the lipstick lesbian or the feminine lesbian, and that followed me because I am, by all means, I will say, a femme. The they them comes from my about gender in general, like my claiming that it is a construct. I will use they them to reassure that it is a construct, that's just my way of expressing that or supporting that idea. But in my physical appearance and how I show myself, I am largely femme, and I like being in my feminine. But I recognize that when I am attracted to other femmes, which, by George, I am a femme who loves me some femmes. Granted, I like all sorts of people, but when a femme loves a femme, she gets fucking ignored. No, that's what I used to think. Honestly, I remember having this crush on one of my coworkers, and I started dressing more like studdish, hoping that maybe she'd notice that I was. And it didn't work. And I was sad, even more sad. I remember speaking to our other coworker, Des, who was more on the mask scale, and asking her about it. And I finally realized, I was like, I'm just trying to play a part that I'm not. It feels wrong because I'm trying to fit into something where I don't belong. I'm not that. I'm not a mask lesbian. I am a pansexual, bisexual who likes pretty feminine ladies sometimes, like. And so but I mourned so much, not just because the girl I liked was straight, even though she was bi-curious, which I mourned so much for that, but I mourned because I didn't know. I was back there at that, where's the model? What does that look like? How do I get there? How do I reach these beautiful babes? And without new fear unlocked, by the way, being a creeper, because I'm so tired. I understand that women especially are just constantly bombarded with like, come, show me boobs, hit me, like all sorts of just constantly being hit on, and we don't want it. And I don't want to be that. So I was afraid of being creepy. If I liked a girl, it's coming off as creepy if I tried to hit on them. Oh well. Eventually, I did have some more I did get to have some one-on-one sexy times with women. And the first one was adorable because it was with somebody else who was also in a very similar situation. And they were just kind of wetting their toes, dipping their toes into the fullness of their like queerness. And we were so worried about alarming the other the entire time that we were fully in our heads, not in our bodies. And at the end of it, like, I just ended up cuddling with them and telling them how much fun they probably would have if they dated our other very openly out lesbians. and to this day, we are still like amazing friends. Like, that is one of my best friends now, and sweet friends. But I recognized that there was something missing too. Like, it felt weird. Like, I didn't know in that situation how to proceed. And I wondered if it was, am I missing something? Do I need a strap? I think I want a strap. And so I definitely got one of those. Because I like, that's something I was interested in. Then with the other girl, that was fun. I felt more confident coming into it because I was applying the things that were being done to me that I liked from previous partners onto them and trying that out. But it's still, while it was fun, it was still not what I fully expected or wanted. There was something missing. And I started wondering what that was. Like, because the casual girl sex was, oh, okay, yeah, that's fun. But it feels empty. There's something weird here. And then I went on Tinder and I found her. She was beautiful. Everything that physically I am very much attracted to. And she was at the time in an open relationship. They were swingers, essentially. And I met them at a concert or a live music event that we were coincidentally both going to that night. And she took my breath away, and we were both gay panicking towards each other. But this girl was the person who unlocked the fullness in me that I wanted to experience always. I get the U-Haul thing, guys. Like, I get it. I get it. I admired her. I always love and respect my women's, but like, I admired her. I found her to be gorgeous. I loved just everything that she was. And so I tried to dote, but unfortunately she was already had her time taken up a lot by work, her other relationship, and work. It kept happening. So the time that we had together was brief, very unfortunately brief, but it let me see what I wanted. At least in that realm, I wanted the way we gelled was very good. And so I started chasing that feeling again through dating apps, whatever. I would go out. Unfortunately, it turned me into a very sad little gay. Because I'd mourn for that. I'd long for it. So I'd go to like events or something and to try to get my head off and maybe meet somebody else. And then I'd see all these beautiful ladies just like dancing with men's, or like just me not having luck. And I'd just start weeping. And this would continue. So I'm being very vulnerable here with my patheticness, so to speak. So I appreciate you listening to that. And try not to judge me a little, too harshly. I feel like I'm not alone in that experience, but yeah, who knows? Well, as I searched, I ended up finding one of my other partners. Her name was Nico, and she was and is absolutely lovely. Like the coolest, most badass, fucking powerhouse strong mama you could ever find. And she rode a motorcycle, and she pretty much rebuilt her own house by herself. Had a great garden. I was like, man, she's gonna get along really well with my partner Dev, and they did. And so, so I met her, and also she had like a BDSM dungeon that she built. I was like, oh, this is perfect. But when I met her, I quickly realized I didn't have a sexual attraction to her, and I panicked, and I was so upset about it. And I remember we were lying naked in her, just like this nice little tub she has outside for just like dipping in when it's hot. And we were lying in there, and I got sad, and I was like, Nico, I am so sorry that I'm, unable to show up for you in this space. And she said, honey, that's the beautiful thing about sapphic relationships, especially. You just come as you are. You're fine. There's no pressure. There's no need for anything. What we have is what we have. And I love what we have. And I said this in another podcast episode too. Like, how silly of me to think that the lack of sex devalued the relationship anyway, or what I was bringing to the relationship in any way. What does that say again about asexual people? Like all of these things, like it's not a requirement. So our relationship continues to be beautiful, and one based off of comfort and just all sorts of wonderful things there. And yet I do still find myself searching for that sapphic sexual connection. I do. I want it. It's been 36 years of wanting it. And I want, not just a sexual connection, honestly, because I'm a person who, as I've found, I'm demisexual with women. I need to have a good context of how our relationship dynamic is in order to bring that in, to bring the fullness of myself in to that intimate space as well. I realize that the way I love men and the way I love women are completely different. And I know I'm speaking in binary a lot here, but it's because our society is so engrossed in the binary. And I also don't know yet how I am in relationship with other gender nonconforming queer persons. I haven't gotten there yet. I haven't experienced it yet. I'm checking it out. Let's see. So yes, I am still looking for that connection, because the way I love women is the prince. That or my idea of the prince. I want to be someone who gives them a place of peace and rest and relief, because I know we carry so much on our shoulders. I want to be able to spoil them with love and attention and care. I want to do things for them. I want to write them poetry. I want to take them out on picnics. I want to take whatever they make or do and put it on a pedestal. I want that. I want to spoil her, And the way I love men, well, now it's different, but because I found a good one. But the way I love men, I found, or the way my relationship is with Devin, at least, is one of where he cares for me. He wants to do those things for me, so I allow it. And I feel a little displaced because I have nowhere to give my things to, my little goblin gifts. But because of that, honestly, I have the space. to be able to put all of myself in another relationship in that aspect. I mean, I'm still discovering myself in this space and in this queer community and space, because for a long time I didn't know if I belonged here. You know, first off, bisexuals, you know, we they have a sordid relationship with bisexuals sometimes, and I'm pansexual. And I remember even recently when somebody asked me if I was, you know, what sexual orientation I was, and I said pansexual or bi-pan, and they who was a lesbian couple, kind of ughed at me. And I was like, come on, y'all, let's not do this to each other. Like, you should know how it feels to be invalidated. So I'm gonna keep searching. I'm gonna keep looking and discovering these bits of myself. And I'm excited to learn what's there and how many ways it expresses itself. Because remember, sexuality is a fluid thing. It changes, and context changes it. People, there might be certain persons who surprise you, that you're like, oh, I didn't realize. Like, allow for it. It's fine. It's natural. And sometimes the way you love a certain person is going to look different than the way you love another person. And, you know, that's in a way a part of relationship anarchy's whole thing, where it says, hey, don't try to fit people into the same categories. Go ahead and let each love be what it is and honor it. And that's the plan. But yeah, that's my little gay story from back in the day to now. I don't know if this is anything yet. I don't even know if I'll post it. But I just wanted to share a little bit about my experiences and see if any of you out there have had any stories to share, because this is our month and our voices should be heard and our representation matters. Because gosh, I wish I could have met somebody like me when I was young, who I could be like, I want to be like you. I appreciate you all for listening. If you want to find out some more about me, you can check me out on Instagram at AskAddieAdler, website at www.askaddieadler.com. And if you'd like to support me, you can now tip me on Ko-fi. Also at Ask Addie Adler. Everything is at Ask Addie Adler. I did good branding. So go ahead and check that out. Also, look up our Discord, available on the link tree that is in the Instagram bio. And until next time, everyone, thank you for listening. Enjoy.